Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? She sat there, pen still in her hand, eyes fixed on the map projected across the wall. Lines and red dots, arrows curling like veins across unfamiliar terrain. The chatter of voices filled the room, men talking over one another, debating routes, questioning intel. But not a single glance fell her way. It wasn't new. She had grown used to it. Still, silence pressed differently tonight, heavier. The mission briefing was supposed to unite them, to tie their nerves together into one thread of focus. Instead, she felt like the thread no one wanted to touch. Her questions lingered unasked. She could hear her pulse against the inside of her ear, louder than the hum of the projector. She wrote something small in the corner of her notepad, a word only she could see. Wait. Because patience had been her weapon, long before any rifle had been placed in her hands. The commander's voice cut through the room. We step off at 200. Weather's not in our favor, but the window's small. You all know your roles. His tone was clipped, final. Then he scanned the table, nodding at each man, brief recognition, a silent stamp of belonging. When his eyes brushed past her, it was as if she was made of air. No acknowledgement, not even the weight of his gaze. And yet she carried a secret none of them knew. Something that tethered her to this mission in ways they couldn't imagine. Something she had sworn never to reveal, until it was too late to turn back. She closed her notepad, stood quietly. Nobody noticed. Nobody stopped her as she slipped from the room, her boots tapping out a rhythm of restraint against the concrete corridor. Outside, the air was cooler. Night pressed against the base like a held breath. A guard at the gate nodded as she passed, but his eyes carried the same polite distance. She wasn't invisible to him, but she wasn't part of his world either. She paused in the courtyard, lifting her face toward the stars. They blurred for a moment, not from clouds, but from something heavier in her chest. A memory. A little girl's voice, laughter carried by the wind, a ribbon of hair caught in sunlight. She clenched her jaw, forcing the image away. Not now. She couldn't afford to bring ghosts into this night. Still they came. The echo of that child's laughter was the reason she was here, the reason she had said yes to a mission others had walked away from. The others thought she volunteered out of loyalty, or adrenaline, or sheer recklessness. None of them understood the weight that drove her forward. None of them knew she was living for someone else. She walked back toward the barracks, boots sinking slightly into gravel, each step a small rehearsal of the road ahead. Inside, men were already prepping their gear, rifles cleaned, magazines stacked, radios checked. Her corner bunk looked untouched, neat as always. She sat down and pulled open her duffel. Inside, wrapped in olive fabric, was her rifle, custom-fitted, balanced to her eye, a sniper's weapon. Her hands moved with quiet familiarity, running checks no one had asked her to run. Chamber clear, scope aligned, stock smooth beneath her palm. Every touch carried a memory of the places she had lain hidden, waiting for a target that might never appear. The patience of stone, the stillness of shadows. But tonight felt different. Her throat tightened, though she swallowed it back quickly. She would not let the others see weakness, not when they already doubted her place among them. Across the room, two soldiers laughed quietly at a joke she couldn't hear. Their voices rose and fell with an ease she envied. She wondered if they ever felt this ache of standing outside a circle, or if they ever carried the kind of burden that pressed into her every breath. She lifted a small photograph from the side pocket of her pack, edges worn, colors fading, the face of the child again, smiling, whole, untouched by the world's cruelty. Her chest caved for a moment, but she drew in a long breath, steadying herself. This wasn't the time to remember, but neither could she let herself forget. She slid the photo back, zipped the pocket shut. Then she whispered a promise, barely audible, "I'll come back for you." The barracks fell into its usual rhythm, gears shifting, hands working, silence stretching in between. Yet under the surface, nerves prickled. Every soldier had their ritual before a mission. Some prayed. Some wrote notes they might never deliver. Others smoked in silence, staring at walls as if they could already see the fire ahead. She tied her boots tighter, double knotting them as if the strength of a lace could hold her together. And still, something lingered, a sense that the night ahead would test them in ways no briefing could prepare them for. At 200, they moved out. Engines hummed low as armored trucks rolled past the gates. She climbed into the rear seat of one, pressed between men who barely glanced her way. Their eyes were locked on weapons, gear, the black stretch of horizon. The road rattled beneath them, every bump echoing through her spine. Dust rose behind, swallowed quickly by the dark. She shifted slightly, pressing her forehead against the cold metal frame of the truck, letting it ground her. Minutes blurred, conversation was scarce. Each man carried his own silence like a shield. Then a voice cut through, rough, older. "You ever get tired of being ignored?" She turned. It was Alvarez, broad-shouldered, scar tracing his cheek like a map line. He rarely spoke, but when he did, people listened. She met his gaze steady. "You get used to it." His lips twitched, almost a smile, though shadowed by something heavier. "Don't. You shouldn't." He looked away then, staring into the dark. His words lingered, though, sinking deeper than the rattle of wheels. She wondered what ghosts he carried, what silences pressed against his ribs. But before she could ask, the convoy slowed. Lights dimmed. Engines dropped to a crawl. A signal passed from front to back, silent, practiced. They were close. The target compound lay just ahead, hidden in a valley of rock and dust. Her heartbeat steadied, not from calm but from the familiar focus of a sniper's breath. She checked her rifle once more, the cool metal sliding against her gloves. Every motion was measured, unhurried. Precision lived in patience. But beneath it all, something else stirred, a question she hadn't let herself ask aloud. Would she return from this night whole, or would her sacrifice finally claim more than she was willing to give? The trucks halted, orders whispered, boots hit dirt. They moved like shadows, breaking into smaller teams, each step rehearsed yet alive with tension. The valley air clung dry in her throat, carrying the smell of dust and oil. The silence was unnerving, too still, as if the land itself was waiting. She dropped into position on a ridge laying flat against stone, scope lifted, vision narrowed. Through the glass, the world shrank into shapes and shadows. She caught sight of figures moving at the compound's edge, armed, alert. Her finger hovered over the trigger, steady, patient, breath in, breath out. But then she froze, because one of the figures moved differently, smaller, fragile, not a soldier, not a man. A child. Her throat closed. The world tilted for a heartbeat. She blinked hard, forcing herself back into focus, but the image burned. A child weaving between men with rifles. The mission parameters had said nothing about this, nothing about civilians, let alone children. Her pulse surged. Memories collided with the present, a storm breaking loose inside her chest. She saw again the photograph in her pack, the promise whispered in the barracks, the laughter of the child who had been her reason for living. Her finger trembled against the trigger. Orders crackled faintly in her earpiece, words sharp, clipped. Target acquired, engage on my mark. Her chest locked. Engage, but how? Her eye stayed glued to the scope, but her mind spiraled elsewhere, into the past, into a story no one here knew. Because she hadn't told them the truth, not yet. That the child she had lost was the reason she fought. That this mission was not just about duty, it was about redemption. And that, perhaps, sacrifice was not about dying at all, but about living, living for someone else unbroken. What do you do when the face in your crosshairs reminds you of someone you once loved? Her scope caught every detail, the tilt of the child's head, the way small hands clutched the fabric of an oversized shirt, the fragility of a figure out of place in the heart of armed men. Her breath shortened, breaking the rhythm she had trained years to master. The voice in her earpiece sharpened. "Engage, sniper, do you copy?" She closed her eyes for half a beat, willed her finger still. She knew what she was supposed to do. Orders were clear. The perimeter had to be cleared before the teams advanced. Hesitation endangered them all. But the rules of war never accounted for ghosts. She shifted the barrel just enough to hold the child outside her scope. It wasn't disobedience, it was survival, her own kind. She whispered under her breath so soft the wind stole it. "Not you, never you." A sharp crack echoed across the valley, another rifle, not hers. A hostile fell to the ground, gun slipping from his grasp. The radio hissed alive again. "Sniper support confirmed. Move in." No one noticed her silence. No one saw her choice. The squad advanced, shadows cutting into the compound. She stayed on the ridge, eye fixed on the scope, covering their movements. She tracked hostile after hostile, firing when she had to, breathing in that slow, patient rhythm she had drilled into muscle memory. But every shot carried the weight of what she hadn't done, the life she'd spared. Her chest ached as she followed the child's movements through the glass. The boy stayed close to the edge of the compound, ducking behind barrels, small enough to disappear in the folds of shadow, unaware, perhaps, of the storm unraveling around him. The firefight erupted suddenly, sound tearing open the night. Bullets cracked, dust rose, voices shouted over one another orders, panic, fear disguised as control. She fired once, twice, a third, each shot precise, stripping enemies from rooftops, covering her team's flank. Yet inside, the war was louder, the memory of another child, the one she had lost, bleeding through every trigger pull. Her daughter's name, unspoken here, forbidden in her own throat, beat against her like a second heartbeat. Leela. She saw her in flashes, bare feet running through grass, tiny hands reaching for her uniform when she had come home between deployments, the last smile before goodbye, and then silence, a silence that had never left her since. The compound burned with gunfire, but inside her it was another night replaying endlessly, the night she got the call. The accident. The words no soldier could ever brace for. Your child didn't make it. Her breath caught, eyes blurring against the scope. She blinked hard, forced herself back into the present. She couldn't falter now, not with lives on the ground depending on her. She fired again, enemy down, another roof cleared. But still her gaze drifted to the boy, alive, running. Her throat tightened with something raw, something dangerous. A question that haunted her. Was she sparing him because of who he was, or because of who he was? Down below, Alvarez's voice roared through the comms. "Building 2 secure. Resistance heavy in the east wing. Move." The team's silhouettes flickered through her scope, each man fighting for the mission, for survival. She tracked them, covered them, but her mind wrestled with itself. She wanted to protect the child. She also wanted to protect them. And sometimes those two paths didn't intersect. Gunfire thinned after minutes that stretched like hours. The air choked with dust and smoke. Then the radio cracked with the commander's voice. "Compound secure. Sweep for intel. Clear all remaining hostiles." Clear all remaining hostiles. The phrase repeated in her head, darker each time, because she knew what some of the others would see the boy as, a loose end. Her pulse spiked. She shifted her scope, sweeping for him. Gone. Her stomach dropped. He wasn't by the barrels anymore. Not in the open yard. Not in the shadows she had memorized. Panic fluttered sharp under her ribs. "Alvarez," she whispered into her comm, breaking protocol, "watch the south corridor. Possible civilian." Static, a pause, then his voice low, uncertain. "Copy." She knew what she had just done. Risked exposure. Revealed what she'd kept hidden, the child in the compound. Some would question it. Some would dismiss it. But others would make sure no loose ends remained. Her throat burned with the weight of what she had set in motion. The squad pushed deeper into the compound. Doors kicked. Rooms cleared. Shouts echoed, and then a sound she wasn't ready for, small, panicked footsteps through rubble. Her scope found him again. The boy, running straight toward the east wing, toward chaos. And behind him another figure, masked, armed, faster. Her body moved before her mind caught up, scope adjusted, finger pressed, a single shot. The armed figure dropped. The boy froze, inches from the body that had been chasing him. His chest heaved, face pale in the glow of burning debris. For a moment he looked straight toward her ridge, though she knew he couldn't see her. But in his eyes she recognized something. Not gratitude, not fear, something else. A reflection of her own loneliness. "Sniper, confirmed shot," the commander's voice broke in. She exhaled slowly, hostile neutralized. "Good work, continue Overwatch." The words stabbed deeper than they should have. Good work. They had no idea what she was really protecting. No idea that in sparing this boy, she was breaking a piece of herself open all over again. Minutes stretched. The firefight dwindled into silence. Boots stomped through rubble, calling clear. Radios reported progress. But her focus stayed locked on the boy, who now crouched in the shadow of a wall, trembling. Alvarez's team swept near his hiding spot. She held her breath, waiting, dreading. One wrong glance and the boy would be dragged into the light, judged not as a child but as collateral. But Alvarez paused. She could see it through her scope, his body stilled, his head tilting as if he sensed something. Then, almost imperceptibly, he shifted his gaze away and led the others further down the hall. Her chest loosened, though her heart still raced. Alvarez had seen him, she was sure of it, but he had chosen silence. Why? The mission wrapped in controlled chaos. Intel gathered, charges set, retreat signaled. Explosives cracked behind them as the compound collapsed into dust and flame. Soldiers loaded back into trucks, exhaustion heavy in their bones. She descended from the ridge, boots slipping against rock, body weighed by more than gear. When she reached the convoy, she felt eyes brush her for the first time all night. Not acknowledgement, not camaraderie, but something else. Suspicion, maybe. Alvarez leaned against the truck, helmet under his arm. His scar caught the light of fire behind them. He watched her approach, quiet, unreadable. When she passed him, he spoke low, meant only for her. "He reminded you of someone, didn't he?" Her chest tightened. She didn't answer, couldn't. Alvarez studied her face for a beat longer, then looked away, climbing into the truck. She followed, heart hammering, fingers still trembling faintly against the rifle. As the convoy rolled back into the night, silence thickened again. Only the rumble of engines filled the air, but her mind refused to quiet. The boy's face lingered. Alvarez's question lingered. And underneath it all, the secret she carried pressed harder than ever. Because she knew this wouldn't end here. The boy was still out there. And so was the truth she hadn't told anyone. Not about her daughter, not about the promise she had broken. Not about the real reason she fought at all. Why couldn't she sleep, even when the others collapsed into silence? The barracks was filled with the heavy rhythm of exhausted men, boots still half-laced, rifles leaning against bunks like tired sentries. The compound was ash behind them, but the mission lived on in her chest, louder than explosions, sharper than gunfire. She lay on her back, staring at the ceiling. Every blink brought the boy's face. Wide eyes, shaking hands, alive because of her, and maybe endangered because of her too. She turned onto her side, pulling her blanket tighter, as if it could smother the weight pressing against her ribs. But nothing dulled it. Not the fatigue in her muscles. Not the ringing that still ghosted her ears. And then came the image she couldn't push away, her daughter, Leila. She was younger in the memory than in the photo tucked in her pack. Bare feet running down a hallway, hair flying, giggles spilling like water. The last hug before the deployment that had changed everything. The last whispered, "Come back to me, Mama," before the call that shattered her world. Her throat locked. She sat up suddenly, boots hitting the floor. She couldn't stay here, not in this silence. Slipping outside, she walked until the base lights dimmed and the horizon stretched dark and wide. The desert night was cold, sharper than the day's heat. She tilted her head back. Stars scattered across the sky like fragments of promises. Alvarez's voice came from behind her. "You don't sleep either." She stiffened but didn't turn. Some of us don't have that luxury. He stepped closer, boots crunching gravel. For a moment he didn't speak, just stood near, his silence heavy but not unwelcome. Then quiet, "I saw him, the boy, you protected him." Her jaw clenched, words pressed dangerous and sharp, "And you stayed quiet." Alvarez let out a breath, not quite a laugh. "Command would have cleared him, you know that." She turned finally, eyes narrowing. "And you don't agree?" His face was shadowed, but his scar caught the starlight. "I've buried enough to know when a bullet isn't the answer." Something in his tone broke past her guard. She studied him, searching for the man behind the soldier. He looked back steady, as if he carried ghosts too heavy to name. But before she could ask, an alarm cut through the night, sharp, urgent. Both turned, the base stirred awake, shouts carried, vehicles roared alive. "Contact?" she asked. Alvarez's jaw tightened. "No, not contact, something else." They jogged back toward the barracks, the night breaking open around them. Inside, the commander barked orders. Recon team spotted movement near the valley, survivors regrouping, possible reinforcements inbound. "We're mobilizing at dawn." Men strapped gear, loaded mags, tightened vests. The air buzzed with tension, sharp and restless. She froze mid-stride, survivors regrouping, reinforcements inbound. The boy. Her chest clenched with dread. If enemy fighters had survived, if they regrouped, they would have found him, used him, or worse. Her fingers curled around her rifle strap, knuckles whitening. She had a choice: keep her silence or break it and risk everything. Her voice cracked through the room before she could stop it. "There's a civilian, a child, in the compound." The room went still, heads turned, eyes narrowed. The commander's stare landed on her like a blade. "Explain." Her throat was dry, she forced words through it. "During Overwatch I saw him, non-combatant, he survived the engagement." Murmurs rippled, some scoffed, others shook their heads. The commander's eyes didn't leave hers. "And you withheld this." She swallowed hard. "I confirmed hostiles, but I could." Her words faltered, the truth too jagged to say aloud. "I couldn't kill a child, I couldn't lose another one." The silence dragged. Then the commander spoke, cold and final. "You compromised protocol." Her stomach dropped. But before he could continue, Alvarez stepped forward. His voice cut steady. "She's right, I saw him too, non-combatant, alone." The commander's eyes flicked between them. For a moment the room balanced on a knife's edge. Then he snapped, "We don't waste resources chasing ghosts. Mission stands. Survivors regrouping take priority." The men nodded, moving again. Orders carried, ignored her presence like smoke dissipating. But inside something hardened. If the boy was alive, if he was in enemy hands, she couldn't leave him. Even if it meant breaking every rule left. The hours until dawn blurred, gear checks, vehicle prep, the cold gnawing at her fingers, but under it all her mind spun in quiet revolt. She wasn't fighting the mission anymore, she was fighting herself. When the convoy rolled out at first light, she climbed in without a word. Alvarez slid beside her, silent as always, but his eyes flickered with something, recognition maybe, or warning. The road stretched endless, dust trailing behind wheels. Soldiers around her whispered bets about numbers, intel, survival, but her thoughts were elsewhere, on the boy, on Leela, on the unbearable weight of sacrifice twisted by fate. Halfway through the ride, Alvarez leaned close, his voice barely carried over the engine. "You're thinking of going after him." She didn't look at him, didn't need to. "If he's still alive, I can't leave him." Alvarez was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You'll burn for this." Her jaw tightened. "I already have." The words hung heavy, sharper than either expected. Alvarez studied her profile but said nothing more. The convoy slowed near the valley, dust kicking up in thick clouds. Engines cut. Men dismounted, spreading into formation. The landscape was scarred, blackened debris, jagged rock, remnants of fire. Yet through it new tracks marked the earth. Recent, too recent. They moved cautiously, rifles raised, scanning horizons. The air crackled with the threat of ambush. She dropped into position on a ridge again, scope sweeping. Sweat prickled under her vest despite the cold. Every shadow stretched too long, every sound too sharp. Then movement. Figures in the distance, armed, advancing. The firefight broke fast, brutal. Bullets slicing air, dirt exploding in bursts. Men shouting, radios crackling. She fired from the ridge, covering her squad, pulse steady despite the chaos. One shot, two, precision threading through noise. But then her scope caught something else. A flash of small limbs. The boy, pulled along by a fighter, half dragged, half running. Her chest constricted. He was alive, but he was a hostage now. Her finger froze on the trigger. She couldn't shoot without risking him. The comms roared. East flank heavy, needs support. Her scope shifted back, firing quick, controlled. Hostiles fell. The squad pushed forward. But her eyes darted again and again to the boy, each glimpse cutting deeper. Her breath hitched. This wasn't just about him. This was about her daughter, about the second chance she would never have, about refusing to let another child vanish into silence. She whispered under her breath, almost prayer, "Hold on, I'm coming." The battle stretched, minutes twisting into something endless. But through it all, her focus split between duty to her squad and duty to something bigger, something personal. And when the dust began to settle, when the last gunfire echoed into silence, the boy was gone again. Dragged deeper into the valley, into shadows she couldn't reach, yet. Her chest hollowed, but her resolve burned sharper. She would not let this end like before. Not with another grave she couldn't bear. Not with another silence too heavy to carry. How far would she go before the line disappeared completely? The valley smelled of smoke and iron, the kind of stench that clung to skin long after the battle was done. Men moved like ghosts among debris, checking weapons, calling numbers, counting themselves alive. But her eyes stayed locked on the horizon, where the boy had vanished into shadows. Her heartbeat hadn't slowed, not since she'd seen him pulled away, not since the choice had crystallized inside her, terrifying and unstoppable. She couldn't leave him. Orders didn't matter anymore. The commander's voice snapped through the comms. "Sweep complete. Regroup for exfil. We move now." Boots shuffled. Radios clicked. The men obeyed. But her body didn't move. Her knees stayed pressed into the dirt, rifle clenched tight, scope still sweeping the valley, searching, hopping, fearing. Alvarez's shadow fell across her. "You're not coming, are you?" She turned, meeting his eyes. He wasn't accusing, he wasn't even surprised, just resigned. Her throat tightened. "He's alive, I saw him, they took him." Alvarez's scar caught the fatting light. He exhaled slow, like a man carrying a weight too familiar. "You follow him, you're alone. Command won't back you, they'll call it desertion." Her jaw set, "Then let them." Silence hung between them, broken only by distant crackles of fire dying in rubble. Alvarez shifted, glancing toward the squad regrouping by the trucks. "You think saving him will bring her back?" The words hit like a blade. She flinched before she could stop herself. He saw it, he knew. Maybe not the details, not Leela's name, not the unbearable hole she carried, but enough to know her ghosts. Her voice cracked low. "This isn't about bringing anyone back. It's about not losing another." For the first time, Alvarez's gaze softened, almost fragile. Then he muttered, "You'll never make it alone." He turned as if to leave. then stopped, looked back, and in his eyes was something she hadn't expected: decision. Two, he said, two have a better chance than one. Her chest clenched, words failed her. But before she could answer, the commander's bark rang out sharp. Move out now. Alvarez glanced once more at her, then jogged toward the others, falling into the line. She stayed frozen, torn in two directions, until the engines roared to life. Dust swallowed the convoy as it pulled away, carrying the mission, the orders, the obedience she no longer cared to follow. Silence returned, heavy and endless. She rose slowly, adjusting the rifle strap across her shoulder. Her decision was already made. She was going after the boy. Her boots pressed into dirt still warm from firefight as she began to track the path deeper into the valley. Faint footprints, drag marks. She moved slow, deliberate, ears tuned to every whisper of wind, every shift of stone. Hours bled. The sun climbed, heat pressing like weight against her back. Sweat trickled, thirst burned, but she pressed on step after step. And with each step, memories bled into her focus. She saw Leela again, her tiny hand gripping hers on the first day of school, refusing to let go. Stay with me, Mama. She saw herself kneeling, promising, I'll always come back. She saw the brokenness of that promise in the silence of the accident, the call she'd never forget. And now this boy, faceless in comparison but carrying the same fragility, the same helplessness. She couldn't turn away. She wouldn't. The trail bent into rocky outcrops, deeper into the valley. Then voices. She dropped low, pressing against stone, listened. Men, at least four. Their words carried faint in a language she half understood. She didn't need translation. Their tones were sharp, commanding, and one voice was smaller, higher, pleading. The boy. Her pulse spiked. She edged closer, crawling against dirt, rifle clutched to her chest. She reached a ridge overlooking a clearing. There they were. 4 armed fighters, dusty uniforms, rifles slung loose. And in the center the boy, knees pressed into ground, hands bound, his face pale with fear. Her scope lifted instinctively, narrowing her vision. One man shoved the boy hard, shouting. The boy stumbled, coughed, tried to pull back. Another laughed. Her finger trembled on the trigger. She could end this. Drop one, then the next. But 4 against 1 was risk. If even one bullet missed, if even one fighter reached the boy. A sound snapped the thought, footsteps behind her. She spun, rifle ready, then froze. Alvarez. He crouched low, rifle already unslung, face set. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. His presence was answer enough. 2. She exhaled slow, relief and dread tangled tight. Then they shifted into position, silent communication weaving between them. She marked targets with a glance. He nodded, they adjusted, waited. Patience, timing, breath. Then 2 shots cracked as one. 2 fighters dropped before their laughter could die. Chaos erupted. The last 2 spun, rifles raising. She fired again. 1 down. Alvarez moved quick, finishing the other before he could take aim. Silence slammed back. Dust settled, bodies stilled. The boy didn't move. He stayed crouched, bound hands trembling, eyes wide with terror. Slowly she lowered her rifle, rose from the ridge, stepped into the clearing. The boy flinched as she approached, shrinking back. She knelt, setting her rifle aside, raising both hands empty. Her voice softened, breaking from the hardness it always carried. It's okay. You're safe now. The boy stared, breathing ragged. Tears streaked his face, cutting lines through dust. She reached carefully, cutting the ties at his wrists with her blade. The rope fell. His small hands shook as they rubbed raw skin. You're safe, she whispered again. The boy's lips parted, voice cracking, foreign words she barely caught. But the tone, pleading, questioning, was universal. He asked her why. Her throat tightened. She couldn't answer in words he'd understand. So instead she pulled the photograph from her vest pocket, the one of Leela. She held it where he could see. His eyes flicked from the photo to her. Confusion softened into something else, recognition maybe, the kind of understanding that didn't need language. She tucked the photo back, stood, and offered her hand. The boy hesitated. Then slowly he placed his small hand in hers. Her chest ached. The weight of ghosts, the promise of redemption, the fragility of trust, all condensed into that one fragile touch. Alvarez stepped closer, scanning the perimeter, voice low. "We need to move, fast. Reinforcements could be on us any minute." She nodded, gripping the boy's hand tighter. "Then we don't stop until he's out." And as they slipped back into the valley's shadows, she knew the path ahead was no longer about orders, or ranks, or even survival. It was about sacrifice. Not in dying, but in living for someone else, unbroken. How long could three people move through a valley built to swallow men whole? The night pressed heavy on them, a curtain of black stitched with distant fires still smoldering from the earlier battle. Every step crunched against gravel, loud in her ears, though Alvarez insisted it was nothing. To her, each sound felt like a flare, each breath a betrayal of their position. The boy clung to her side, his small hand still wrapped in hers. He hadn't spoken since the clearing. His silence said enough, fear too sharp for words. She carried it like a mirror. The land shifted as they moved deeper, jagged ridges, shadows stretching like claws. The moon cut silver against stone, revealing and hiding with equal cruelty. Her rifle weighed heavy across her chest, but the true weight pressed somewhere deeper. What if she had condemned them all? Alvarez moved ahead, steady, scanning with every step. He was silent too, but his silence was different, practical, trained, almost mechanical. Her silence was emotional, filled with ghosts. They paused under an outcrop, shelter for a moment. The boy curled against the rock, small frame trembling. She crouched, pulling her canteen free, offering it gently. His eyes darted between them, unsure. Then slowly he took it, sipping like every drop mattered. Her chest tightened. That simple act, trust, fragile and tentative, meant more than orders, medals, or ranks ever had. Alvarez crouched opposite, watching her instead of the boy, his expression unreadable in moonlight, though his scar caught the glow. Finally, he spoke. "You know this doesn't end well." Her hand froze halfway to adjusting the boy's sleeve. "What do you mean?" "They'll call us in missing. Then they'll figure it out. Disobeying orders, going off mission. If command doesn't court-martial us, someone else will finish the job we started." She met his eyes, steady. "Would you have left him?" Silence. For a moment his jaw worked, as if chewing on an answer. Then he looked away, scanning the valley again. "Doesn't matter what I'd have done," he muttered. "Only matters what comes next." But his presence, the fact that he had stayed, had chosen to stand with her, said enough. The boy shifted, head resting against her arm. She froze at the unexpected closeness. Then carefully she let him lean. His warmth pressed through the chill. His trust seeped into her bones. She thought of Leela. The way her daughter used to fall asleep against her shoulder on long train rides. The way her small breaths had once been the safest sound in the world. She swallowed hard, forcing air through lungs that wanted to collapse. Living for others, not dying for them. It was the only way to keep the promise she'd once broken. Alvarez rose. "We move before dawn, I'll take point." The hours bled. Darkness carried them across uneven ground, into gulches and out again, skirting paths where enemy patrols might pass. Each sound in distance, distant engines, stray gunfire, tightened her chest, but they kept moving. The boy never let go of her hand, not once. By dawn, fatigue gnawed at them all. The horizon bled orange, spilling light across jagged ridges. Alvarez raised a fist, halting them near a ravine. He crouched, scanning with binoculars. Movement north slope. She leaned close. Through the glass, figures emerged, fighters, armed, moving like predators through the rocks. Not far, too close. Her throat went dry. They're tracking us. Alvarez lowered the glass, voice flat. We have two options: keep moving and risk them catching up, or hold, set a trap. The boy looked between them, not understanding words but reading tension. His eyes wide, terrified. She pulled him close, whispering softly though her voice shook. We'll keep you safe. The decision carved itself before she could weigh it. We hold. If we keep running, he won't last. Alvarez's eyes flicked to the boy. Then he nodded, grim. Then we make them come to us. They moved quickly, setting position along the ridge. She found a perch, rifle ready, scope cutting through distance. Alvarez flanked, hidden by stone. The boy tucked low behind them, pressed small as if trying to disappear. Minutes stretched into eternity, every heartbeat louder than the last. Then they came. Figures moving, unaware of eyes on them. 4, then 5. Armed, scanning, confident. Her finger tightened, she breathed slow, waited. One step closer, another. She fired, one down. Alvarez's rifle cracked, dropping another. Chaos erupted, shouts, scrambling cover. Return fire ripped the air, bullets sparking off stone. She ducked, ears ringing. The boy cried out, covering his head. She forced calm, lifting again, scope locking. Fired, another fell. Alvarez moved with precision, cutting angles, his presence steady like an anchor. Together, they held the line. Then a click, her rifle jammed. Her stomach dropped. Fingers scrambled, working instinctively, forcing the bolt, clearing the chamber. Sweat stung her eyes. Bullets chewed rock near her head. She flinched, heart slamming. Then Alvarez's shout, raw, sharp, down. She dropped flat as an explosion ripped the ridge, dust and stone showering. Ears deafened, lungs burning. She rolled, gasping, disoriented. Through the haze, shapes moved, enemy fighters pushing closer. Her rifle cleared, chamber snapping back. She rose to knees, firing blind, suppressing. Alvarez's voice barked, pulling her back to rhythm. Left flank, cover. She adjusted, firing, cutting space for him to maneuver. He moved fast, ruthless, dropping another. At last, silence. The last fighter crumpled, body sliding down slope. Dust hung heavy, smoke burned lungs, but they were alive. Her hands shook as she lowered the rifle. Sweat and blood mixed on her skin, though she didn't know if it was hers. The boy's small frame pressed against her side, trembling violently. She wrapped an arm around him, pulling him close, whispering broken words. It's over, you're safe, you're safe. Alvarez emerged from cover, limping slightly but standing. His eyes scanned the carnage, then locked on her. You're reckless, he muttered, but his voice wasn't anger, it was weary respect. She met his gaze, still holding the boy. We don't stop, not until he's out. For a moment neither spoke. The weight of choice, of consequence, lingered heavy. Then Alvarez sighed, shifting his rifle. Then let's move, before more come. They pressed deeper into the valley, carrying silence with them. Hours later, under fading light, they reached a riverbed. Dry, cracked, but its banks offered cover. They settled briefly, exhaustion crushing. The boy curled against her again, eyes closing, finally surrendering to sleep. She stroked his hair absently, staring at horizon fading into twilight. Alvarez sat nearby, cleaning his weapon in silence. Then, finally, he spoke. What was her name? The question pierced. She froze, breath catching. His eyes never left his rifle. The one you see every time you look at him. The reason you're doing this. Her throat tightened. Words refused, but the silence between them demanded truth. Leela, she whispered. The name cracked in air, fragile and holy. Alvarez nodded once. No judgment, no pity, just understanding. For the first time in years, she said her daughter's name aloud without shattering. The night grew colder, but for the first time since the mission began, she felt something small, buried deep, hope. Because sacrifice wasn't in dying. It was in carrying life forward, even when broken. And she wasn't done carrying. Not yet. How do you know when you've crossed the point of no return? The valley was quieter now, but not peaceful. Silence here was a predator, stalking, waiting. Every gust of wind across the broken riverbed felt like breath on the back of her neck. Still, they moved because stopping meant being found. The boy walked between them, now small hand gripping hers, though exhaustion dragged at his steps. She felt every tremor in his palm, each stumble, each shallow breath. He wasn't built for this. He was just a child, and yet he had survived things most men would never endure. Her chest tightened at the thought. She had dragged him into another fight. Could she drag him out alive? Alvarez walked ahead, posture tense, rifle angled downward but always ready. He hadn't spoken since the firefight. He carried it like she did, the weight of lives taken, the tally of choices carved into bone. Finally, as dusk bled across the ridges, he raised a hand. Hold. They ducked into shadow beneath an overhang. The boy collapsed against her, asleep almost instantly. She envied that, his ability to shut out the world, even if just for a moment. Alvarez lowered himself across from her. In the dim light, his features looked older, worn not just by war but by something deeper. He broke the silence first. You think command will forgive this? Her eyes flicked up sharp. They won't. Then you understand. She nodded. The truth was a blade they both carried now. They weren't just running from fighters in the valley. They were running from their own side too. Her voice came low, steady. It doesn't matter, he's alive, that's all that matters. Alvarez studied her, then exhaled, a bitter laugh escaping. You sound like me years ago. She tilted her head. What happened years ago? For a long moment he didn't answer. Then he leaned back against stone, eyes closing as if summoning ghosts. I had a brother, younger, got pulled into a militia back home. He was 16, barely old enough to shave. I swore I'd bring him back. I thought saving him would fix everything. Make up for all the mistakes I'd made before. Thought if I fought hard enough I could drag him out. He paused, jaw clenched, breath unsteady. I found him, but not alive. Too late, always too late. The words hung heavy in the cave, choking the air. Her throat tightened. She saw the pain in his eyes, old but never healed, the kind that lived forever in marrow. I enlisted after that, he continued. Not for country, not for duty, for punishment maybe, to keep fighting until there was nothing left of me, until I couldn't feel it anymore. He opened his eyes, fixing them on her. You think carrying him will save you. It won't. It just keeps the wound open. Her grip on the boy tightened instinctively, protective. Her voice cracked low. Maybe, but if saving him doesn't close the wound, at least it keeps it from growing. Alvarez studied her, searching her face. Then he nodded, slow, almost respectful. The boy stirred in his sleep, shifting closer against her. His small frame pressed against her ribs as if seeking anchor. She felt it again, that fragile pulse of trust, that unspoken plea, don't leave me. And she knew she couldn't. No matter the cost. The night dragged on. They took turns watching, though neither truly slept. Distant flares lit the horizon once, followed by muffled booms that carried across the valley. Somewhere out there, battles continued. Somewhere, orders were still being followed, but not here, not anymore. By morning, dust hung thick in the air. They pressed forward, skirting along jagged ridges where the sun carved shadows into stone. Then the crackle of static in her earpiece. Her chest froze. She'd forgotten it was even still connected. A voice bled through, harsh, clipped. Command. Unit 4, report. We've tracked unauthorized deviation. Respond immediately. She froze mid-step. Alvarez turned sharply, eyes narrowing. The voice repeated, sharper this time. This is command. You've abandoned protocol. State your location and return for debrief. Failure to comply will be considered desertion. Her throat went dry. She looked at Alvarez. His face was unreadable, though his hand tightened on his rifle. She reached up slowly, finger brushing the earpiece. She could answer. She could beg. She could explain. But she didn't. The boy's small hand tugged at hers, grounding her. She pulled the earpiece free, crushed it between her fingers, and dropped the shards into dust. Alvarez's eyes widened slightly. Then he gave the faintest nod. There was no going back now. Hours stretched. Hunger gnawed. The boy grew weaker, each step slower. She carried him at times, his head resting against her shoulder, small breath shallow. Every time his weight pressed against her, she felt the echo of Leela again, a reminder of why she was here, why she had chosen this path. Late afternoon, clouds gathered, heavy and dark. A storm brewed, wind howling through ridges, carrying grit that stung their faces. The sky cracked with distant thunder. They found shelter in a half-collapsed hut near the valley's edge. Roof broken, walls crumbling, but enough to shield from rain when it came. The boy curled against a corner, shivering. She wrapped her jacket around him, tucking it close. His eyes blinked open, wide, filled with questions he couldn't ask in words. She touched his cheek gently. "You're safe, I promise." The storm broke then. Rain hammered the roofless hut, a drumbeat against stone. Water pooled in cracks, soaking dirt into mud. She sat near the boy, rifle across her knees, watching the doorway. Alvarez leaned against the opposite wall, studying her in silence. Then he spoke, voice almost lost under the storm. "You know, they'll never let us walk away from this." Her eyes stayed on the boy. "Then we don't walk, we run until he's free." "And after?" Her throat tightened. After, the word was a horizon she couldn't see. She didn't answer. Instead, she closed her eyes, listening to the storm, letting it drown everything else. For one moment, in that ruined hut, with rain soaking the earth and the boy breathing softly beside her, she allowed herself to believe. That sacrifice wasn't about dying in the valley or living by command. It was about this, choosing again and again to live for someone else, even if it meant burning every bridge behind her. What happens when the body begins to fail before the spirit does? The storm had passed, but it left the valley heavy and sodden, as if the land itself had been broken. Mud clung to their boots with every step, each footprint too loud, too permanent. She felt exposed. The boy coughed against her shoulder, his breaths uneven, fever burning through his small frame. He was slipping, and she was running out of time. Alvarez walked ahead, his limp more noticeable now, favoring his left leg. She saw him falter once, gripping rock for balance, but he waved it off when she caught the glance. He was too proud to admit pain, too stubborn to stop. They moved slow, every step dragging. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, thirst drying her throat raw. She could feel her body reaching limits she'd ignored for too long, but she couldn't stop. Not when the boy's weight reminded her of every reason she had left. By midday, the heat returned, baking the valley into a furnace. The boy burned hotter still, skin damp, shivers racking his frame even under her jacket. She touched his forehead, fire. Her chest caved with fear, infection, dehydration, or worse. She swallowed hard, whispered to Alvarez as they climbed into shade. "He won't make it like this." Alvarez's jaw tightened. He scanned the horizon, then muttered, "There's a village 2 clicks east, small, might have what we need." Her eyes narrowed. Might, or it might be another trap. Or it's the only chance he's got. Silence cut between them, filled only by the boy's shallow breaths. Finally she nodded, "Lead the way." The village lay broken at the valley's edge, mud walls crumbling, roofs patched with tin and tarps. Smoke drifted faint from a cooking fire. A handful of figures moved among goats and ruins, thin and wary. Her instinct screamed danger, but desperation drowned instinct. They approached slow, weapons lowered but ready. Alvarez's voice was low. "Stay sharp. People here, they've seen too much. Trust is a currency nobody can afford. An old man emerged first, leaning on a cane, eyes sharp despite years etched deep in his face. He spoke quick in his language, tone guarded. Alvarez responded haltingly, broken words from years of scattered deployments. The exchange was tense, clipped. Finally, the old man's gaze fell on the boy cradled in her arms. Something shifted. His jaw clenched, eyes softening almost imperceptibly. Then he barked an order. A woman stepped from a doorway, carrying a clay jug of water and a bundle of cloth. The woman's eyes lingered on the boy, then flicked to her, silent recognition passing between mothers. The boy drank weakly, water spilling down his chin. She wiped it gently, heart cracking at the fragility of it. The woman reached to take him, but the soldier instinct in her flared. She pulled him back, tense, protective. The woman didn't argue, she only gestured inside. They entered a dark room, cool against the heat outside. The boy lay on a mat as the woman mixed herbs into steaming water. The smell was sharp, earthy, bitter. Alvarez stood at the doorway, rifle slung but eyes scanning constantly, always guarding. The woman pressed the mixture to the boy's lips. He resisted, but she coaxed, patient. Slowly he drank. Minutes stretched. The boy's trembling eased, breaths growing steadier. His fevered skin cooled slightly under her hand. Relief nearly broke her. She exhaled a shaky breath, whispering gratitude the woman wouldn't understand. But safety was an illusion. She felt it the moment Alvarez stiffened. Voices outside, footsteps not villagers, heavily armed. Her blood iced, enemy patrol. Alvarez's whisper was sharp, "They tracked us here." Panic surged. She gathered the boy, clutching him close, eyes darting. The woman shook her head, whispering urgently, pointing to a trapdoor in the corner. Alvarez hesitated only a second before moving. He lifted the cover, revealing a crawl space beneath the floor, dark and narrow. She slid in first, clutching the boy against her chest. Alvarez followed, lowering the trapdoor silently above them. Darkness swallowed them whole. Boots thundered above. Voices shouted, harsh and demanding. The villagers answered in clipped tones, feigned calm. A fist slammed against wood. A child cried somewhere outside. The boy whimpered, trembling in her arms. She pressed her palm gently over his lips, whispering into his hair, "Shhh, quiet, little one, quiet." Her own heart hammered so violently she was certain they'd hear it. Sweat dripped into her eyes, the stifling crawl space suffocating. Alvarez lay beside her, rifle ready, every muscle wound tight. His eyes met hers in the dark. No words, only the silent agreement that if discovered, they would fight until the end. Above, Boots moved closer, heavy, searching. Then silence. A voice barked something sharp. Boots retreated, the weight of presence lifted. Minutes felt like hours before the trapdoor creaked open. The old man's face appeared, urgent. He motioned quickly. They climbed out, every limb aching. The boy clung tighter than ever, burying his face against her chest. The old man's eyes burned with quiet defiance. He gestured east, whispering a single word Alvarez translated, "Go." No explanation, no demand for thanks, just a command as absolute as any they had once obeyed. They went. By twilight, the village was a shadow behind them. The boy slept deeply for the first time since she'd held him. His fever had eased, though weakness lingered in his every breath. She carried him still, unwilling to set him down. Alvarez walked beside her, silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke, voice low. "They'll come harder now. They'll know you won't stop, and neither will they." She tightened her grip on the boy, then let them. Alvarez glanced at her, something like weary admiration in his eyes. "You're going to kill yourself for this kid." She met his gaze, voice steady but heavy with truth. "Maybe, but at least it'll mean something." He didn't argue, maybe because he believed it too. The valley stretched endless before them, the horizon painted in fading light. Every step forward was war, against time, against enemies, against their own breaking bodies. But she felt it still, deep in her chest, pulsing like a fragile heartbeat. Sacrifice wasn't in dying. It was in choosing, again and again, to live for someone else, unbroken. Dawn rose slow, bleeding across the horizon in muted shades of gray and pale gold. The valley looked endless, a land carved by suffering yet stubbornly alive. She carried the boy still, though his weight seemed heavier by the hour, not because he had grown, but because her own strength had thinned to threads. Her shoulders burned, legs quaked, every breath seared. But she would not let go. Alvarez trudged beside her, face drawn tight, his limp worsening. Every so often he pressed a hand to his side where blood had dried days before. He hadn't complained once, not when his body begged, not when silence screamed of final costs. They were two broken soldiers carrying one fragile child through a world that had no mercy left to give. And yet in that fragility there was something unshakable. By midday, smoke curled faint in the distance. Not village smoke, not cooking fires, military. Alvarez stopped dead. His voice was low, steady. "They're closing in, we don't have long." She adjusted the boy against her chest. He stirred faintly, eyes opening just enough to find hers. For a moment she thought he might smile, but it passed, swallowed by exhaustion. Her chest cracked with fear. She whispered almost to herself, "We're not going to make it." Alvarez's jaw set. "No, you are, he is, that's enough." The certainty in his tone burned sharper than any bullet. They pressed on. Every step was war now, not against enemies but against their own failing bodies. The land stretched endless, broken by ridges and ruins. By evening they reached a crumbled outpost, concrete walls riddled with holes, rusted barrels stacked like forgotten graves. Shelter, if only briefly. Inside, shadows gathered. Rats scurried across the floor. It smelled of rust, ash, and abandonment. She laid the boy gently on a pallet of old rags, brushing damp hair from his fevered face. He slept, chest rising shallow but steady. For the first time in days, she let her arms fall slack, muscles trembling with release. Alvarez sat nearby, back against the wall. His rifle rested across his lap, though his eyes drifted heavy. She studied him in the dim light, the way his hands shook slightly, the way his breaths came ragged. He was bleeding inside, she knew it. "Alvarez," she whispered. His eyes flicked to hers, stubborn fire still alive. "You're not going to make it either." He smirked faint, bitter. "I wasn't planning to." Her throat closed. She wanted to argue, to fight, but the truth sat heavy between them. He knew his fate, and so did she. The silence stretched, broken only by the boy's shallow breaths. Finally Alvarez spoke. His voice was rough, edges frayed. "You ever think about it, why we're still here, after everything?" She shook her head, unable to find words. He nodded toward the boy. "That's why, not medals, not missions, him." Her chest ached with something deeper than grief. It was recognition. The sound came suddenly. Boots outside, engines growling faint. Her blood froze. "Enemy." Alvarez's eyes sharpened, the soldier in him alive again. He rose unsteadily, gripping his rifle. "They found us." Her pulse thundered. She grabbed the boy, heart tearing with panic. Alvarez moved to the doorway, shoulders squared though his body betrayed him. She hissed, desperate, "You can't fight them alone." He glanced back, and for a heartbeat the weight of years showed in his eyes. Weariness, pain, but also peace. "Yes, I can, that's the point." "No." "Listen to me." His voice cracked like command, fierce, final. "You run, you keep him safe, you don't look back." Tears blurred her vision. "I can't leave you." He smirked, the ghost of old bravado. "You already did, the moment you chose him." Boots grew louder. Voices shouted orders. Alvarez stepped into the doorway, rifle raised. His silhouette cut sharp against the dying light. She clutched the boy, sobbing silently, torn between duty and heart. Then Alvarez spoke one last time, without turning. "Go, make it mean something." Gunfire erupted. She flinched, covering the boy's ears, forcing her legs to move. She ran through the crumbling outpost, through shadows and ruin, each shot behind her another tear in her chest. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The valley opened before her once more, endless and merciless. She ran until her lungs burned, until her body begged her to stop, but she didn't. She couldn't. Night fell heavy. The boy stirred weakly, whispering something too faint to catch. She kissed his forehead, whispering back, "You're safe. I've got you. I won't let go." But her mind screamed with Alvarez's voice, echoing like gunfire in her skull. She didn't know how long she ran, only that her legs finally gave out near a ridge. She collapsed to her knees, holding the boy tight, rocking him against her chest. The stars above were cold and endless. Her tears spilled freely, for Alvarez, for the boy, for everything they had lost. But beneath the grief, a fire remained. Not the fire of orders, not the fire of war. The fire of choice. She whispered into the boy's hair, voice trembling but fierce, "They'll never take you, not while I breathe." And in that vow she felt it, the shift, the truth she had carried all along. War was never about numbers, never about strategy. It was about hearts. One heart carried through fire and loss could weigh more than any war ever fought. By dawn she walked again, step by broken step, the boy nestled against her chest, fragile but alive. Behind her lay ruin, sacrifice, silence. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, endless ground to cover. But she carried him still. And in that carrying she was unbroken. The figure of a soldier framed against the rising sun, weaponless, weary, but undefeated. A woman who had defied war itself, not by winning battles, but by refusing to let go of the one life she could save. And when history asked what war was, it would not be measured in victories or defeats, in strategies or statistics. It would be remembered in her, the soldier who carried the heart of war in her arms and chose to walk on.